Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi tahirin. We are continuing our lessons of comparative religion, and today we are continuing our topics related to comparative aspects between Christianity and Islam. So, in the last lessons, I've talked about the books and the manuscripts, and I've introduced a bit about Christianity and some Islamic views on some issues related to Christianity. Today, we're going to turn our attention to the Nicaean Creed. The Nicaean Creed. So, the reasons for this Nicaean Creed. In this section, I will critically analyze some parts of this Nicaean Creed. You could do more can be done, but just briefly, some critical points about and some critiques about this Nicaean Creed. This Nicaean Creed was the scale or standard by which other Christian sects were considered as heretical. So, by this Nicene Creed, other Christian related beliefs, other groups that related themselves to Christianity, if they were against this creed, they may fall into the heretical side, according to the Christian Nicene Creed. So it was the scale and standard used for considering heretical other groups of theological thought. So if they did not ascribe to this, they were considered heretical. Now, this Council of Nicaea, this was presided over by Constantine, who was an emperor of Rome, and during his time he adopted Christianity as the official religion. He lived between around 272 Common Era to 337 of the Common Era. This is over 200 years after Prophet Isa alayhi salam had left the world. So it is said to have been ordered by Constantine due to the disputes that arose among Christians. They had different Christian debates and disputes. So this council was formed to solidify a creed, solidify a creed, solidify a theological thought. So what did he do? This Constantine guy, he invited 1,800 bishops approximately. However, the result was not all of them coming. Only around 300 actually attended. That's a big number of missing theological opinions. Only 300. He had invited 1,800 bishops. However, only around 300 actually attended. So it's a lot of missing bishops. The number of attendees does vary, so approximately 300, but it varies anywhere from 250 to 318 bishops, so approximately around 300. So they had these few hundred, around few hundred bishops. They had gathered in order to set the creed for Christianity, a creed for Christianity. So let's take a look at Article 1 of the Nicaean Creed. So Article 1 of the Nicaean Creed says that we believe, this is the Nicaean Creed, it says that it says we believe in one God. Okay, good so far. One God, the Father Almighty, maker of all things, visible and invisible. Okay. Okay. You can see, besides some reservation here, that most of this we could agree with. The problem here for us is literal fatherhood. Literal fatherhood. And so literal fatherhood is problematic. Now, Judaism probably views Israel, meaning Bani Israel, as being a metaphorical firstborn of God. So this is a metaphor, right? So they use it in a metaphorical sense. I'm not saying that there wasn't people who may have claimed it literally amongst them, but this is what the kind of view that could be understood from them, uh, at least nowadays. And maybe this is the kind of approach that was present in the past, throughout history. But there were some who had claimed literal sonship, because we have mention of that in the Holy Quran, although this is not their current belief. So they believe metaphorical, right? Not literal. Literal means someone is actually the son of someone. Metaphorical means like, okay, the firstborn son, they get disciplined like a firstborn son, they're educated. So this kind of idea. So, but hence they are disciplined like a child. So they discipline like a child. In this context, and different views may spring up, ranging from between literal and metaphorical usages. So within this context of this idea, you could have now different ideas and influences from different areas and different thoughts that range between literal and metaphorical usages. In Islam, we do not believe God begets. We do not believe God has children, nor is he begotten. Having children is something that is for a created thing, who copulates, who has a wife, who has some kind of need, some bodily desires, who gives off something from himself in genetic inheritance, who leaves some wealth, possessions as inheritance. God is far above that. Subhanallah. Everything belongs to Allah. He does not die. He does not give off a piece of himself. Everything depends on Allah. Allah the Exalted is far more exalted than that. He doesn't need a wife. He doesn't copulate. He's far more exalted. So we in Islam believe that Allah does not have children, nor is he the child of anyone. So we would have a problem over here. So look, here's our proof. Lam yalid walam yulad walam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad. Surah Tawheed, ayats 3 and 4. He does not beget, nor is he begotten. He's neither beget nor was begotten, nor has he any equal. Trans interpretation is there's nothing like Allah the Exalted. We have ma kana lillahi an yattakhidha min walad. Subhanahu idha kada amran fa innama yakulu lahu kun fayakun. It is not for Allah to take a son. Exalted is he, subhanahu. Exalted is he, glorified is he. When he decides a matter, when he decrees to do a thing, when he decrees an affair, a matter, فَإِنَّمَا يَقُولُ لَهُ كُنْ فَيَكُونَ. He only says to it, be and it is. Be and it is. He doesn't need to have a son. He's not subjected to the natural system, takwini system of laws, of cause and effect, of interreactions. Rather, he's created that whole system and it all depends on him. But he's not subject to it. So Allah the Exalted doesn't have a son. We believe in Islam that Allah does not beget, nor is he begotten. And this is a fundamental Islamic belief. This is not something that can be negated. This is something that's in the Quran, very much in the Quran, revealed from Allah the Exalted. Okay, so we have some critique with the first part of the Nicaean Creed. Let's continue. The Nicaean Creed again says, we believe in one Lord. Okay. Now, sometimes this word Lord in the English is used for God when it's capitalized. You can research about that. So they say we believe in one Lord, Jesus Christ, the only Son of God. eternally begotten of the Father, God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made, of one being with the Father. Through him, all things were made. This is dualism. This is idolatry. You're saying that two things eternally exist. There's two gods in this sentence. And it's created at the same time. It's a conflict. How could it be eternally over there if it's from God? So from means, it came from. It must have had initiation, right? There's a lot of critiques here that we could go on and analyze here and make points against just from looking at the words. But so big problems here. Big problems here. First, being literal sonship. The first big problem is literal sonship. Literal sonship. Another problem is something eternal from God, and it being God as well. Something eternally with God, and it being something with God as well. This would entail a kind of polytheism in thought. We believe that the only eternal being is Allah the Exalted. So nothing else is eternal like that. Things could be created to live on forever, but they were never always there. Only God is always there. Everything else has a beginning point. Okay, and we have classes you could go to that go more in depth on Islamic theology on this. So for something to be eternally with God, it means there are two gods then, or however many things you're saying is eternal, because all other things are created besides God. So Allah is the only eternal. So for something to be eternal with God means that there's more than one God. But all things other than God were created. So they're not eternal. Allah is the only eternal. Therefore, this is shirk at an intellectual level. Any change occurring to God indicates need and contingency. And if he were needy and contingent, this would be against the notion of God being wajib al-wujud, which is needless, self-sufficient, all-powerful being that doesn't have a beginning. A non-contingent being. And we have arguments for that in our theology lessons. Okay, so no children then. There's another issue. We believe that Allah the Exalted is not begotten, nor is he begetting, nor does he take a wife. All these things being such as being a father, being a son, being a spouse, are all related to creation. These are created qualities and are features of some of the contingent beings. Also, when one has a son or is the father of someone, it necessitates a kind of sharing between them, a sharing between them of something from the self, or a derivation of something from the former to the later. Whereas Allah the Exalted being only Allah the Exalted, his exalted being only belongs to him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and no one shares in it. And no one has anything independently from him. Rather, all things need him, and his being is his exclusively. It all belongs exclusively to Allah the Exalted. It's not like a father and son. It's not like that kind of DNA transfer. Secondly, to take a wife means one has some need for a spouse to be able to beget a child, as example, whereas we stated priorly that need is a quality of contingent beings, mumkin al-wujud, whereas Allah the Exalted is wajib al-wujud, necessary being. Similarly, being the son would mean one needed a father. Hence, a son cannot be needless. So we cannot say God is the son, because why? Because if he was the son, then he needs someone else. He's needy. And God is needless. Just like we cannot say God is creation, because creation is needy. God is needless. He's the creator. As that is against our notion of wajib al-wujud. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. He begets not, nor is he begotten, as Allah tells us in the Quran. So some observations here then. First, giving birth to anything indicates splitting from the father of something of him. Okay? When giving birth, it indicates splitting from the father of something of him. And this would be any type of derivation or splitting off. This would indicate that there is a kind of division and partition, as once something is divided, it now has parts. And it's a compound being. It then becomes, if it has parts, it becomes murakkab being. It becomes a compound being, necessarily depending on its parts to be a whole. That's the way it's created, right? Therefore, this compound, this murakkab being, would be needy of its parts. And hence, since it's needy in itself, it would be contingent being. It'd be mumkin al-wujud. This would be, we're talking about now created things. Whereas Allah the Exalted is needless. He's wajib al-wujud, absolutely needless. So this would be against our notion of wajib al-wujud then, from that aspect. If we were to develop that it was being murakkab, then this would be an argument against it here. Second observation. A child is of the same species of its parents. Okay? God is not a species. God is not a species. Firstly, if such were the case, then there would be other gods, which is impossible. Secondly, species themselves are referring to contingent things. Therefore, we believe that Allah the Exalted is too exalted, too lofty, than to attribute children and a wife to him. Rather, we must keep our ideas about Allah the Exalted to the purest and most suitable understandings, so as not to tarnish the purity of Tawheed, of the uniqueness of Allah the Exalted, of the exaltedness of Allah the Exalted, and not to assign to God in our ideas the features of created things, limited things, finite things, and contingent things, while realizing our absolute dependence on Allah the Exalted and need for Him. So we have this concept in theology called Sarmadiyya. We have this concept called Sarmadiyya. Allah is the Exalted. Allah the Exalted is eternal always. Hence, he does not have a how nor a beginning. Since he always is existent, having a point of coming into being is a characteristic of contingency, not of necessary existence, not of wajib al-wujud. Wajib al-wujud is self-subsistent, needless. When we think of eternity, we can classify it into two types. We could say there's forward eternity. This is something was created, and it's created to live forever, to go on forever. It will not end. This type is possible for contingent beings. Why? Because they had a initiation point. There was a time, there was a point where they were not existent, and then they were brought into existence. These are created things, contingent things, if Allah allows them to go on forever. They have a beginning point. They are caused. They are contingent. They are made to occur. As for the usage of eternal, as in not being in time, because time is a measure by which we count the years and the days of things, it's possible that we can imagine something that is contingent, mumkin al-wujud, but not subject to time. But it still would not be eternal always. It would just be not subject to time, but it still was created. There was still a period, a phase where it wasn't there. and then it was created, then it occurred. So, or maybe even subject to different times. This again is possible with contingent beings, with mumkin al-wujud, as they would, if such a thing is proven, still have a point of creation, where they began from potential to actualization, where they were initiated and created. So they're not always eternal. This, however, is at the level of our thoughts and such things. If there is a meta time for things where there's no time, then this such a thing would have to be proven. But just in our thoughts, we can imagine if such a thing exists. So that's the first type. The second type of eternal is a being which is always eternal, as meaning it always was existing. It was always existing, is always existing, and always will exist. This thing is alive. This thing is living. This is Allah the Exalted. Only Allah. This type of eternality is the meaning that it has no beginning and no end. This being has no beginning and no end. This one is for Allah the Exalted only. This is what we call Sarmadiyya in our theology, which means that Allah the Exalted has no beginning and no end, and He has no additional quality to His self. He is the necessary existence. He is necessary in Himself, and that indicates that He, the Exalted, has Sarmadiyya. All believers believe in that Allah the Exalted is Baqi forever. However, they do differ in details about being Baqi, being al-Baqi. It is said that Abu Hassan al-Ash'ari, the founder of the Ash'arite school, which is a major Sunni school of theology, he believed that Allah is Baqi and Baqa is a quality additional to His self. Again, this is a similar problem. We have additional things that additionally exist with the self, but they're not the self. This is problematic. Baqa is because it's kind of a intellectual shirk, right? There's no way nothing at all existed eternally with God. Baqa is a sifa, is a quality, an attribute external to the entity itself, but depends on Allah the Exalted in the Ash'arite school of theology, the major Sunni school of theology, which we don't agree with in this area. We would raise a problem here by saying that if that was the case and Baqa what is additional to the entity, but not the entity itself, and it depends on the entity, then this thing that you're talking about is a contingent being, and that's not Allah the Exalted, which is very problematic. And we have talk about those in different areas. But some observation. First, if Baqa is contingent, then one could say Allah. But if one could say Allah, the Exalted, self is not baqa, it's not forever, which is problematic. Allah, the Exalted, always is, because why? He's wajib al-wujud. Second, if it's additional to the self, if that attribute is additional to the self, then it would be said that Allah would be needy for His parts, which is against the notion of a necessary being, wajib al-wujud again. So we would negate that kind of idea. Third, if the attribute is additional to the entity, it means that Allah depends on a contingent being for His being forever, His baqa. Therefore, this view is problematic in our understanding of Allah the Exalted being a single, unique self, which needs nothing, as samad, He's needless. He is wajib al-wujud. So we don't accept that anything existed eternally with Allah the Exalted. Not even an attribute, not even an attribute that's separate from His self. We believe that Allah the Exalted, His self, is one unique being. When we talk about attributes, we're just pointing at something that is referring to one unique being. This unique being is all powerful, all eternal, all knowing, but that's one being together. It's not different parts. It's one being. Unique, absolute, existent. Another view about Baqa is that Allah is al-Baqi because His very self. Since Allah is wajib al-wujud bi dhatihi, necessary being in his self. So that's our view here. He's wajib al-wujud. He's necessary in himself. So he's always forever. He's always forever. As for proof, we may state that if he is wajib al-wujud due to his own self, then it is impossible for him to become non-existent, or to be ever to have ever been non-existent. Therefore, Allah is always existent and consequently having sarmadiyya, having no beginning and no end. Consequently having no beginning and no end. So this idea of Trinity is a vague notion that seems to be that they say that one God has persons, three persons in one God, called the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. We disagree with Trinity in Islam. Of course, we have Quranic and Hadith proof against Trinity, against sonship. We have those proofs. And that's Allah the Exalted has told us. From an intellectual point, however, we can say that if God has three parts which are different, some parts are contingent and other parts are not, then each is different than the other, then all this indicates need of God, because it would be murakkab being, so he'd be needy for his parts, and there's need in some of the parts, which would be those things are contingent, and then since it's murakkab being, he would be contingent, which is against the very intellectual notion of God being wajib al-wujud, necessary in himself, which is he exalted as needless being, self-subsisting being. We also negate direction and place and time for God the Exalted. And this is certainly against the notion of incarnation into a body as well. God is not incarnate into a body. So let us look, before ending this lesson, we find in the Holy Quran, Surah 4, Ayat 171, Ya Ahlu Kitabi, La Taqlu fi dinikum. O people of the book, O Ahlu Kitab, do not exaggerate in your religion. وَلَا تَقُولُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْحَقِّ. Do not say upon Allah except the truth. إِنَّمَا الْمَسِيحُ عِيسَى ibn Maryam رَسُولُ اللَّهِ وَكَلِمَاتُهُ. The Messiah, Jesus, the son of Mary, was a messenger of Allah the Exalted and his word that he cast toward this transportation toward Mary. Waruhun minhu, and a spirit from him. So have faith. Aminu billahi wa rasulihi, and believe in Allah and his messenger. Wala taqulu thalathatun. See, clearly this is against Trinity. And do not say three. Do not say Trinity. Do not say a three. Do not say a Trinity. Intahu khayra. Intahu khayran lakum. Relinquish, that is better for you. Innama Allahu ilahun wahidun. Allah is only one. Only Allah is one God. Allah is the only one God. Subhanahu an yakuna lahu walad. He is exalted. Exalted. He is too exalted, too lofty, too immaculate to have a son. To have a son. Lahu ma fis samawati wa ma fil ardi. Belongs to him what is in the heavens and what is in the earth. Everything belongs to Allah the Exalted. Wa kafa billahi wakila. And Allah is a sufficient wakil, trustee, guardian. So you see that we disagree fundamentally with this Nicaean Creed. And we have textual proof, many textual proof We have many textual proof against this and some intellectual arguments, and there could be other intellectual arguments maybe that can be brought, just briefly looking at it. Well, and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.